All right. Looks like we're diving deep today. Unmarried parents and child custody.
Lots to unpack here.
Yeah, a ton of info.
Yeah.
Everything from like the legal stuff, to the emotional side of things. It could be pretty intense.
It can be a lot for everyone.
And so we're diving deep, going through a bunch of articles and court cases, really trying to understand all the ins and outs of this whole child custody thing when you're not married.
Yeah. The term custody battle always sounds so
dramatic.
exactly like it's got to be this huge fight. But, a lot of what I was seeing in the research was about, what's truly best for the kid, no matter what the parents' relationship is like.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's not about winning or losing. It's about what's best for the child.
Yeah.
So, okay, let's start with the basics. Legal custody and physical custody.
Two different things.
Two very different things. But what do they actually mean?
Think of it this way. You've got two pies, okay?
Pies.
One pie is decisions, and the other pie is where the child lives. Legal custody is like that decision pie. It's about who gets to, make the big choices, education, healthcare, religious upbringing,
Okay.
all that. Physical custody is the where the child lives pie, who they live with most of the time.
Gotcha. That's a delicious way to put it. The pie analogy.
Right. Helps to visualize it.
Yeah, definitely. So each of those pies, though, it's not always just one parent gets the whole thing, right?
Exactly. You can split those pies. So
Yeah.
you got sole custody, where one parent gets the whole pie, whether it's legal or physical.
Okay.
But you also have joint custody, where they share the pie. So both parents have a say in decisions, or they share the responsibility of where the child lives.
Gotcha. So it's like co-parenting, those specific areas.
Exactly. Sharing the responsibility.
Right. Okay. So I guess if I'm in this situation, I got to think about which decisions do I really care about being involved in?
Absolutely.
That helps me figure out what kind of legal custody I should be asking for.
Exactly. Think about what are the things you feel really strongly about. Education, healthcare, moral guidance.
Right.
Those are the areas where having legal custody means you have a voice.
Gotcha. Okay. And then there's this big idea that I saw popping up everywhere. Best interests of the child.
Yeah, the guiding principle.
What does that actually mean, though?
That's where it gets tricky. It's not like a checklist. Courts look at a ton of factors, each parent's emotional stability, the home environment, what's the child's relationship like with each parent.
Yeah.
And even the child's wishes, especially as they get older.
I was reading about this one case. One parent had a history of really volatile behavior.
Yeah.
And that totally influenced the judge's decision.
Yeah.
Makes sense. You want the kid to be in a stable, safe place.
Absolutely. That's a perfect example of how those best interest factors come into play.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, things get a little more complicated, I imagine, when you're talking about unmarried parents.
For sure.
Because establishing legal paternity, that seems like a big first step.
Huge first step.
Why is that so important?
Because, if paternity isn't legally established, the father might not have any legal rights or responsibilities when it comes to the child.
So even if it's biologically his child.
Yep. Even then, it's got to be legally recognized. So you've got a couple ways to do that. DNA testing is one way. Or you can legally acknowledge paternity.
Gotcha.
But that makes a huge difference in terms of custody arrangements.
So basically, without that legal acknowledgement, he's kind of a stranger in the eyes of the law.
Pretty much, yeah. And that's why establishing paternity is so important. It's not just acknowledging a biological connection. It's about having legal rights and responsibilities.
Right. Okay. That makes sense. So we've got the types of custody figured out. We know that establishing paternity is crucial, especially for unmarried parents.
Right.
But what about the actual custody process? What does that look like? What should someone expect if they're, going through this?
It can be pretty overwhelming.
I bet.
But knowing the steps can help. So first, you got to file for custody.
Okay.
There's specific paperwork and procedures you got to follow, and documentation is super important here.
Documentation.
Yeah, keep track of everything.
Everything.
Communications, expenses, anything that could be relevant. If you end up in court, you need to be able to back up your claims.
So keep a file, an actual physical file.
Yeah, a file, a binder, even just a folder on your computer, anything that keeps you organized.
Okay, so file for custody. Get my super organized file going. What's next? Do I automatically go to court?
Not always. A lot of times, mediation is the next step.
Mediation.
Yeah. It's a way to try and reach an agreement, but it's like less, adversarial than court.
Okay.
So you and the other parent, you meet with this neutral third party,
Yeah.
a mediator, and they help you try to like find common ground.
So it's like having like a referee to keep things fair and help come up with a plan that works for everyone.
Exactly. And, a lot of times mediation actually works. But if you can't agree, then yeah, you might end up in court.
Okay, so filing, documentation, mediation, and then maybe court. Phew. It's a lot.
It is. But remember, there are resources out there to help you. You're not alone in this.
Right. That's good to know. And even if you do end up in court, it's not always this like dramatic, TV courtroom thing.
Yeah.
It's more about like presenting your case and, hopefully working towards a solution that's actually good for the child.
Exactly. And that brings us to, co-parenting. Because even if you have a court order, you still have to, like, parent together.
Right.
And that could be tough.
That's where it gets really real, I think. Yeah. One of the articles really hammered on this, co-parenting strategies.
It's crucial.
And I can see why. Because it's one thing to have a legal agreement, but it's another thing to actually make it work, day to day.
Totally. Effective co-parenting, it's so important for the kid, but it's hard.
Yeah.
Like, open communication is key, even when it's hard.
Yeah.
It's about boundaries, expectations, and sometimes just, taking a deep breath before you react.
Because it's easy to, like, get caught up in your own emotions.
Yeah.
But you got to put that aside and think about what the child needs, even if you're not on the best terms with the other parent.
Exactly. Respect is key, even when you disagree. And remember, you don't have to be best friends with the other parent to co-parent well. You just got to find a way to work together for the kid.
Yeah, that's a good point. So one thing that came up a lot was this idea of a parenting plan.
Yes.
What makes a good one? Like what should be in it?
A good parenting plan, it lays everything out. Visitation schedules, holiday arrangements, who makes decisions about the child, like education, healthcare, extracurricular activities, all that.
Okay.
Having it in writing, it can prevent a lot of misunderstandings and conflicts.
So it's like a roadmap
Mm-hmm.
for co-parenting.
Yeah, exactly. Sets clear expectations, makes things less stressful for everyone, especially the child.
Speaking of stress, it's easy to get caught up in the legal side of things.
Mm-hmm.
But this whole process is emotionally intense for everyone.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, parents are dealing with stress, anxiety, maybe even grief or anger. And kids, they pick up on that. They feel the changes, the uncertainty. They might be scared, confused, even guilty, like it's their fault.
It's tough to think about what the kids go through.
Yeah.
So what can parents do to, minimize that? Like, what kind of support is out there?
Having a good support system is huge. Family, friends, therapists, being able to talk to someone who gets it makes a big difference. And for kids, therapy can be really helpful. It gives them a safe space to process all those feelings.
So open communication is key for parents and for kids.
Yeah, it's all about listening. Really listening to what your child is saying, trying to understand their perspective.
So you go through all this, and then there's this new normal to adjust to.
Right.
And custody arrangements, they might change. Kids grow up, new challenges come up.
Yeah, it's ongoing.
It's not really over, is it?
In a way, no. Being flexible is key. You got to be patient. And, remember that things might need to change depending on the child's needs and, whatever else is going on.
Okay. So what's the biggest takeaway here? What should someone listening to this remember?
I'd say knowledge is power. Understanding your rights, the legal process, and why co-parenting matters, it can help you make the best choices for your child.
Yeah.
And don't forget, there's help out there. You don't have to go through this alone.
That's a really good point. And, as you go through all this, think about what best interests of the child means to you.
Yeah.
Like, what does that look like? How can you actually make sure your child's needs are met? Emotionally, practically, all of it.
It's a big responsibility.
Yeah, it is. But, listeners, you got this. Keep diving deep.
Learn as much as you can, and don't be afraid to ask for help.
That's great advice. All right, we're going to wrap it up there.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us. We'll catch you in the next deep dive.
Sounds good.